So why was a human being created last? To give them humility. Because a worm was created before you. Don't think you're such a big shot. A worm came before you. No small thing, by the way, when Yehoram had the civil war and split the nation into two, and he established the northern kingdoms and separated from the line of David. He banned anybody from going to Jerusalem because he had a particular problem. Nobody was allowed to sit in the Beis Hamikdash at the time of the Elias Regel. How do you translate that? When you go up for the holidays, no one was allowed to sit except one person, the king of Israel. As long as the king of Israel was a descendant of David, they were allowed to sit. So, and he was not allowed to sit. So he couldn't. Once you had that problem, it's humbling. He's the king. We don't relate to kings. I grew up with a bit of a taste for kingship, growing up in England, but it's all kind of gone now. It's a shame. There's something meaningful about them. But anyway, we really digress here. So why was it man created last? To give him humility. I mean, you really speaking, when God created the world, he should have created the first man and then everything else, and that would have been appropriate. That would have been. So God upended everything to teach him this idea that he should have humility, which is a very strange kind of thing, because nothing personal, but I've had my pleasure of meeting more than a few arrogant people. And I've never tried it actually, but I doubt very much that telling them that a worm was created before them would do very much. And the reason I have trepidation, pilgrimage to the temple, right, exactly. The reason I'm just responding to, I'm streaming here, so I'm not sure if everyone's seeing when they see the video, whether they'll see the comments. I hope it comes through. So, I never told anyone, because that would imply that I'm accusing them of being arrogant, which, if you're arrogant, they think they're humble. So why does a worm created before you teach you that you're humble? When you first learned the Bible, and you learned that, or even evolution really, and you learn, wow, human beings weren't first, monkeys came before us. Did that step you down a peg or two? Put you down I don't think so. So what do the rabbis mean when they said that's the whole reason for man to be created last? So you see, it's a fascinating thing that as we go through the 7 days of creation, and hopefully the rest of the Torah, what we're going to learn is that the order of the days, the order of creation, is an order of ascension in functionality. Think of it like an onion. Each layer of the onion needs the previous layer. So we're building an onion, but from the outside in. So the 6th day needs the 5th day, the 5th day needs the first day, the sun's created, the light. So the sun and the moon didn't come till the 4th day, but the light was created. So everything needs light. So the successive day needs the previous day. So for instance, the bananas, if we lose all the bananas, God forbid, no more bananas, the sun and the moon couldn't care less. Right? But the sun and the moon was to disappear, God forbid, that would be a bad day for the bananas. So every successive day, the monkeys need the bananas. The monkeys came after the bananas. If the monkeys were all dropped dead, God forbid, the bananas couldn't care less. The bananas that disappeared, the monkeys would be having a serious problem. The monkeys need the bananas. So every successive day not only needs, but has to fit into the life cycle of the previous day. It's not going to fit into your existence. The The banana's not going to grow because there's more monkeys. Not going to be more bananas because the monkeys have to adapt to the amount and the life cycle of the bananas and everything after that. The very last thing to be created is man. And there's nothing on this earth needs man for its existence. We need to fit into everything else previous to our existence. And that's really the Torah idea of sustainability, of living in the planet. That we have to figure out how to live within the world that we've created, because the world won't figure out how to fit into you. And as we can make things, and we have done this, we can make things prior to us extinct, and they won't come back. The world won't figure out how to adapt to the human being. The human being has to figure out how to fit. It's the only species on the planet in a creation that has this reality to it. And that's humility, because what is humility? It's figuring out how to fit into the world, into the space that you find yourself. That space won't fit into you. You have to fit into it. Now that's true on a level of humanity as a totality, but it's also true and it's absolutely true. And that's the message that the Torah is. In other words, that's how every human being is built, to fit into the world. And that's what we find arrogance to be, is somebody comes along and tries to convince us or believes that they are bigger than the place that they find themselves. And so that they do things that they're out of line, they're out of place, that don't fit. And what happens to all of these people is that they get their heads handed to them. That's true with me, that's true with all of us. We have to figure out how to fit into the world, the people in the world that we find ourselves in, because they won't fit into us. And that's really what humility is. Figure out where we fit in, where is our place in the world. There's one particular place for us in this world, and we have to fit into it. And that's no small thing. The interesting thing is, that's the idea of a king, that's the idea of a leader, that's the idea of a CEO, that's the idea of all greatness, is figuring out. If you go, you can do it online. You look up YouTube, Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, the current great leaders of Elon Musk, all of them. If you listen very, very carefully to how they talk about what they do and how their success is understanding how the world works, not pushing their concept of how the world works, which is a big distinction in politicians. We're not going to go political here, but typically politicians don't do that, because they do that in the business of politics, but not in the politics itself, because they are voted in by people who think you can just mess around with the physics of existence. But anyway, let's not get down that path. So let's get back. Chapter 1, verse 1. Bereshis bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So the first Rashi is absolutely mind-boggling, and every Rashi is really mind-boggling. The first Rashi says like this. We talked about it a little bit last week. Rabbi Isaac. He quotes a previous source. The Torah should have started from the first mitzvah. We talked about that last week. So now we're going to get into why does it start here. So he brings down the Midrash. So what he brings down the Midrash so it says like this. Because the nations of the world are going to come, She'im Yomu, the nations of the world may come and say to the Jews, you are thieves, listim atem, because you stole the land of the 7 nations. So if they come and say that, we will come and answer to them. The Almighty created the world. He gave it to who he wants. He took it from who he wants and gave it to us. In other words, that's the basic principle. If you can create the universe, you get to make the rules. It's your baby. Someone just sold, forget how much it was, millions of dollars for one of these pieces of art, which is totally digital. I go there. There's some things that just stupid on stupid. Someone spent millions of dollars on something they can't really own. I mean, they claim they own it. It's not like a painting. I mean, even paying a few $1 million for a painting that can be reproduced in a way that you can't tell the difference. But one of these digital artworks, it makes no difference. I have exactly the same artwork that you have. The fact that you can say you own it. Okay, fine. But so the nations of the world are going to come and they're going to say, you Jews, you stole the land. So why does the Torah created? Why does the Torah start with in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth? To tell the world, to say this message that God created the world, and he said, listen, he's taking back the land of Israel. He's taking it back and giving it to the Jews. And we quote the famous Talmudic dictum, tough cookies. You don't like it, take it up with the boss. So the whole reason for creation, the whole reason for the story, no, that wasn't creation. The whole reason for the story of creation is so that we would have a portion in the land of Israel, because if the nations of the world would come and they would say you stole the land, we'll have an answer for them, right? Now this is a fascinating Rashi. Because when Rashi wrote this midrash, he's obviously talking, well, no, he didn't write the midrash. When Rashi quotes this midrash, he's obviously talking about the 1948, when the Jews come back to the land of Israel, the nations of the world will say, you stole the land, or might say you stole the land. So he's talking about 1948, because he was writing in the middle of the Middle Ages, around 1100, which is the middle of the exile. Not the Middle Ages, sorry, the middle of our Middle Ages. The middle of the exile. The Jewish people were in exile for 2,000 years. So around 1100 is about the middle of that. The idea that we would come back to the land of Israel was a very difficult, it was a belief that Jews have, but it's a religious belief. It doesn't fit into the geopolitical construct that they teach in Yale University or even Harvard. The idea that a nation in the history of the world, by the way, the proof that the Palestinians will never get their own state is because in the history of the world, nobody ever recreated the state. There are many, many people that lost their state. There's no such thing as Yugoslavia anymore. And you can say pretty good high certainty it's never coming back. It's gone. But there are many, many countries, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, gone. There are many, many nations that disappears off the face of the earth. They just don't. Lithuania doesn't exist any. Actually, I think there is still Lithuania. I'll take that back. But there are countries in Europe. You can look at old maps and you'll see countries that just don't exist anymore. And that's it. They're gone. They're never coming back. So. In other words, you never have a nation, whatever it happens to be, right, the Armenians, exiled from their land, and then they come back and take back their land. In the history of the world, never happened. So the idea that the Jews, this is going to happen to the Jews, is a religious belief. We believe it's going to happen. So Rashi writes that when it happens, the nations might come and say, you stole the land of Israel. Now, that's a very strange thing to say, because in international law, international law works like this. That if you take something, there is a concept called international law. It's a dubious concept, but anyway, they try and have such an idea. And amongst the nations of the world, they all agree, whether it's international or it's each nation individually, that if you take something that doesn't belong to you, it's called stealing, right? Legal practice 101, right? It's called stealing. There's one exception to this rule, that not only is it perfectly permissible to steal it, take it away from the person who owns it and claim it as yourself, but not only is it perfectly permissible to do it, it's the only way to actually do it. It's regarded as this is the legal way to actually acquire this thing. So I come up to somebody and take this away from them, right? It's called stealing. But there's one thing that everybody agrees, the whole nation, all the world agrees, that if you take it without permission and you claim it as your own, it's yours. That's it. What's that? Land. Right? Everyone agreed that the way you acquire land is to kick off the people or just claim, America's England and Australia's England and all the nations of the world thought of it like this, understood it like this, right? But Neil Armstrong plants a American flag on the moon. This is America. Right? They didn't ask anyone on the moon, do you have a problem with this? No, it's America now, right? So you go around the world, you see this, until they got independence, but even still countries to today, there's still the English, the Falkland Islands, for example. Many, many places that how the Falkland Islands become English. I mean, it's not exactly off the coast of Cornwall. It's because some Englishmen stood there and said, I claim this for the king or the queen, whoever it was at the time. So the idea that the nations of the world will come and they will say to the Jews, you stole the land of Israel. What are you talking about? Every country, who's going to be able to say? Like, the interesting thing, one of these trivial pursuit questions you might get. When did international law change? Because now they go, you can't do that anymore. Technically speaking, right? Technically speaking, they don't listen to it. They don't follow it. So countries take over other countries and they go, okay, fine, you can now call it your country, like Russia's trying to do. But when they took Crimea, no one said boo. And the only place that they give a hard time, about, so to speak, taking other people's lands is the Jews in Israel. But when did they change? When did the United Nations say, we're not following this rule anymore, now you can't take land? When did it happen? Right? Surprise, surprise, 1948. Well, what a shocker, eh? 1948, that's a real surprise. So up until that point, they said you can take the lands. It's not a problem. But anyway, so Rashi writes, if the nations of the world will come and say you stole the land, we can reply with this answer. When Rashi wrote that, it was firmly entrenched amongst all the countries of the world that the way you acquire other land is for stealing it. So how can they come and say to the Jews, you stole the land? Like, the idea that this could possibly happen in Rashi is just, people reading it, I'm sure, going, I don't understand. This has got crazy stuff. I mean, a lot of Midrashim describe things that are going to be or that have happened as like mind-boggling ideas. Like, you struggle to understand what they're trying to tell us. Sometimes it's an allegory, but whatever it happens to be, it's nevertheless hard to understand. What does Rashi mean? Literally, people are reading it in 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1600s, 1900s. They go, how is this ever going to happen? Like, how can they say you stole the land? Lo and behold, 1948 comes along in the most legitimate way in the history of the world. The most legitimate way. The Jews didn't board boats and battleships and come from all the nations of the world and jump on the Palestinians and say, get out, this is our, that's not how it happened. 1948, the United Nations, the nations of the world had a vote. And they said, we're going to give you the land of Israel. It's up to you, right? Because the British, who had the mandate over had the land of Israel, they gave it to the United Nations and said, you decide, we can't figure this out. Right? The British, in the history of England, and no country in the history ever did such a thing. Somebody else decide for us. Mind-boggling. So the British did that. They said, you decide. Incredible. And the United Nations voted to give a section of the land of Israel, right, to the Jews. Right? Now the Arabs said no, the Jews said yes. They started a war, we defended ourselves, took even more of their property, more of their land, which is, even the most liberal, left-wing, anybody, if you land you acquire from an act of aggressive war is certainly yours. So anyway, 1948 comes along, the world decides to give the Jews a piece of land. So therefore, obviously now, Rashi can't be true. And nevertheless, what do? They come and they say, you stole the land of Israel. It's mind-boggling. This is what Rashi writes. How did Rashi know this? And that's a very deep question, very important question, very interesting question. But it's not the question we're going to focus on. So I was speaking to Rav Yaakov Weinberg at Tzal many years ago, and I asked him. He's the brother of Rav Noach at Tzal. So I asked him. I said, "Don't understand this Rashi. Here Rashi's coming along and telling us this fascinating idea that the nations of the world are going to come and say, that's why the Torah is written, Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So I asked him, I said, the Torah is not technically written for the non-Jewish world. They read it, they can open it, they can study it, but it's not written for them. It's written for us. God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. And here Rashi comes along and he says, why there's the whole beginning, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning God. It's a lovely story, it's a fascinating story, it's a great read, I love the story, but it shouldn't really be here. And the only reason it's here is because we're going to answer them this question. When are we going to answer this question? In 1948. That's the time that it came up. That's when it presented itself, because they came and they said, you stole the land. So how it would seem to be that we have the Torah was written for them, so to give them this answer. So he looked at me, he had an amazing way of looking and speaking, and he said, Steve, let's suppose the Prime Minister, I don't remember the Prime Minister at the time, I think it was Rabin, he stands up in the United Nations and he says, I'm fed up with this 242, these are the code names for all the different castigations that the United Nations have placed against the Jews. He said, I'm fed up with 242. You think we have legitimacy comes because you decided that we should have the land of Israel? No. The reason we're entitled to the land of Israel is not because you gave it to us, it's because God gave it to us. He created the world. He took it from he gave it to who he wanted to, took it from them and gave it to us. And he'll quote the famous Talmudic dictum, tough cookies, get used to it. Pound sand, whatever works for you, right? So he says, if the Prime Minister was to get up and say such a thing, what do you think would happen next? I don't know, right? He said, you know what happened next? A Muslim leader would stand up right out. That's very good. That's your book says such a thing. Our book says a different thing. And then a Christian leader would stand up, and then some other guy would stand up. Right? You think that would make the slightest bit of difference? I go, no, I don't think it would make the slightest bit of difference. So then what is it talking about? He says, it's not talking, this is the answer that you give to them. It's the answer you need for yourself. The only people who have a problem with the Palestinians not having the land, the only people are the Jews. We have a problem accepting the idea that they don't have their own land. We create all the problems. All the Palestinians, I'm not saying they shouldn't have human rights and they should be treated fairly and justly and meaningfully and appropriately, absolutely. But this idea that they are entitled to their own country is absolute nonsense, a complete fiction that's perpetrated by us. No, it's not. Don't blame the United Nations or the Biden administration or any administration. We create this fiction. We sustain this fiction. It's absolute nonsense. And it creates all kinds of misery because we don't believe it. Now, here, and then we'll finish with this point, which is a fascinating idea. If the Jewish people had not come back, 1948, had not come back to the land of Israel, then the Torah, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, did not need to be written. In other words, if the Torah writes Bereshis bara Elokim, it's because the Jewish people are coming back to the land of Israel. Now that's not as meaningful to us as it was when Rashi wrote it. But Rashi is writing and telling us that if the Torah writes Bereshis bara Elokim, it means we're coming back. Mind-boggling. If the Jewish people come back and the nations of the world do not say, you stole the land of Israel, then Bereshis bara Elokim did not need to be written. In other words, if the Bereshis bara Elokim is being written, it's because the Jews are coming back and the nations are going to tell us you stole the land. And if the Jewish people do not come to believe that this is true, that God created the world and he gave us the land of Israel, and therefore tough cookies, if the Jewish people do not believe it's true, if the Jewish people do not come to believe it's true, at the moment, we don't really believe it's true. But if we don't come, in other words, just like we're going to come back to the land of Israel, and that came true, and just like they told us, said you stole the land, and that came true, so too, it's going to come true that the Jewish people en masse are going to say, God wrote the Torah and he gave us the land of Israel. Tough cookies. It's just a matter of time. It's going to happen, because if it doesn't happen, then the Torah did not need to be written the way it was written. Bereshis bara Elokim proves the point that we're all coming back to the Torah. We're all coming back to the land of Israel, and we're all coming back to the Torah. Please God so. Thank you very much. You have any questions? Feel free. No, we're all good. Okay, see you next week. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Feel free to text me, email me, or carrier pigeon works too. It's been a real pleasure. Bye, everybody.